roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before him. So open up the gates, make a way before the King of Kings. Oh, God who comes to save, set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power, fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before him. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Tell me. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? No one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? No one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before him. Every knee will bow, every tongue confess.
Your blood that stained the ground is where my hope is found. Your scars caused by my sin, it is where my life begins. How great is your love? How great is your love for me? How great is your love? Oh, how great is your love for me? still I give my life away. Oh, how great is your love. How great is your love for me. How great is your love. How great is your love for me. How great is your love? How great. So high, so deep, so great that it's overwhelming. So high, so deep, so great is your love for me. So high, so deep, so great that it's overwhelming. So high, so deep, so great is your love for me. So high, so deep, so great that it's overwhelming. So high, so deep, so great is your love for me. How great, how great is your love? Oh, how great is your love for me. How great is your love. How great is your love for me.
The King has returned. The prophecies fulfilled. The years of longing are over. The King has returned. And now all will be made right. Amidst shouts of praise and tears of joy, the pleading for justice, the cries for our enemies' defeat. The King has returned. The King who was driven from his land as an infant, who spent his first years as a refugee, who understands pain and suffering. But this King is not who we were looking for. This King brings justice, not over our enemies, but in the midst of our enemies. He brings peace, not in our land, but in our souls. He is the answer to the prayer we did not know we were praying. The King has returned. Long live the King.
Thank you for tuning in. If you're new, my name is Dustin, and if you're new, we're so glad you're tuning in. Maybe you've got somebody shared this on Facebook, and and you saw it, you clicked on it, and got to listening. If you want more info on us as a church, in the description of this video, at the top of this video in the description, there's a link that you can click, and it's just a Google form that gives us your email where we can contact you and give you some info on us as a church. But I just wanted to give you that opportunity. If you want more info, we want to talk to you, we want to know you, we want to help you any way we can. So let's get going. So I have a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So for the past few years, we've kind of been out of that baby stage, that taking care of the kids. They kind of take care of themselves for the most part, dirty diapers and all that. But in the last year and a half, we have adopted our 4th child, Mordecai, from India. And so he is 2.5 years old right now. And Kai has reminded me of what I affectionately call Babyzilla, like the stage called Babyzilla. And so I'm reminded of all of the Babyzilla experiences I had with my oldest son, Tucker, who seemed to be the greatest Babyzilla of all time. But, when we would go to the beach in the summertime, go on vacation down to the beach, I have this thing. I like to build sandcastles. And so I was building sandcastles. I love to build sandcastles down at the beach, and I'm building these sandcastles, and I will spend just hours and hours working and crafting this sandcastle. And, I'll get sunburned, my back will be hurting, my knees will be hurting, and, sand in my shorts. And it always happened like this, is right when I would get something really going, right when I would get this, this tower that's just beautiful, that's just going to be amazing, everyone's going to love it, and I'm going to sit back and look at it and smile. Right when that would happen, it's like I had this, if I would turn my back, I'd go get a drink or a snack, or I would go down to the ocean to cool off, and Babyzilla would strike and just destroy. It's like we have video after video of him just destroying every good thing I ever tried to do in regards to sandcastles. And I don't know about you, but that is the emotion, that remembering that Babyzilla experience and how frustrated I would become at my 3-year-old son when he was destroying things that I was trying to make and build, almost like a kid. But that feeling of frustration and aggravation, that's kind of where I am in this journey. I know last week we talked about fear, but this week that's just kind of where I am. And I'm not feeling a ton of fear around things, but feeling a deal of frustration. And so that may be you today. You may be feeling that way. Maybe you're a business person, you're reeling from the quarantine. You're like, and that may be a little bit of fear too. Like, hey, I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know how this is going to pull through. Maybe you're a health care worker, and I think you guys probably are experiencing the greatest levels of frustration with what you're doing. You're seeing people who, one, are paranoid. 2, you're seeing people who are genuinely sick and maybe lying about it. Or 3, you're just dealing with all that you were already dealing with, and a lack of supplies, and all of these things going around. And so I can imagine that you guys may be frustrated as well. Or maybe and I can relate to this one, maybe you're a parent who wasn't a school teacher, and now you got 4 kids like me, and all of your kids are at home, and you are now, your new role is homeschool teacher. I don't know about you, but that makes me feel a bit overwhelmed, even a bit frustrated. With church, we're kind of building to what we call our Super Bowl as a church. Like this, we're building toward Easter, and we're going like, oh, fingers crossed, are we going to get to have church in the building on Easter? And so that's kind of some of that tension for us, is that we're all trying to do things and complete things and carry on life, but life is just interrupted right now. And I want you to know that no matter where you are today, that the truth of what we're going to learn today and what we're going to talk about today is that no matter where you are on that journey, no matter what fields you're in, or whether you're a homeschool parent or a health care worker who doesn't get to spend time with your kids, or you're just a business person struggling and worrying about the future, I want you to know that you can have peace in the middle of your struggle. In the midst of whatever struggle it is, whatever difficulty it is, you can have peace. And you can have that peace because Jesus Christ came and he lived and he died and he gave you the opportunity to be at peace with God. And when we're at peace with God, we can be at peace with everything else. We actually get the peace of God for ourselves. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into Mark. We last finished with Mark Mark's story in Mark chapter 14 where Jesus is anointed at Bethany, and we see kind of Judas, kind of his greed kind of percolating to the top, and Satan begins to use that secret sin and begins to kind of press buttons, and we see Judas planning and plotting to have Jesus arrested and killed. And so this is where we're going to kind of move through chapter 14 today. We're going to begin in verse 17, but just as it goes is that this is the Last Supper. This is the night before Jesus will be crucified the next day. So he's in the last 24 hours of that period where he's going to the cross. It's becoming very apparent all that is going on. And so we see Jesus going into the upper room with his disciples. John tells us that he washes their feet, and he eats with them, and he gives this institution of the Lord's Supper. This is my body broken for you. This is my blood poured out to give you new life. But I want you to read with me. So if you're reading along in your Bible, it's Mark chapter 14. We're going to begin in 17, and we're going to stay in 14 for a little while. If you want to access the notes, like the outline, and want to make your own notes, you can do that on the Bible app. If you go to a Bible app and then click More, and under Events, you should be able to see Connect Church, if you're in our area, obviously. But you can do that and get the notes. So would you look with me at Mark chapter 14, verse 17 through 20. And when it was evening, he came with the 12, and as they were reclining at the table and eating, Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They began to be sorrowful and to say to him one after another, "Is it I?" And he said to them, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the dish with me." You see, Jesus can relate to us. Jesus has felt, this is your first point, Jesus has felt everything we will ever feel. And so as we journey through this, him in the last hours of his life prior to the cross or pre-cross, we're going to see the fullness of Jesus' humanity on display. That he empathizes with us. It's not that, I think when we think about how we can feel as someone else is feeling, oftentimes we look at it, that God he may be apathetic. Like he may be aware of what's going on in our lives and aware of the issues going on in our current circumstance, but he's like he just don't care. He's just kind of apathetic. They'll figure it out. It'll work out. Sun's going to come out. Quarantine's going to work. Or maybe that he's on the other end of the spectrum, sympathetic, so that God would see us, or we might see other people, and see their suffering and see their hardship and feel sorry for them. But that is not how we should know Jesus. From this text, we're going to find that Jesus is very empathetic. That not only does he see us in our struggles, see us in our frustration, see us when we're angry, see us when we've been let down, but he sees us and he feels or has felt what we feel. You've experienced that before, where you and someone that you know, maybe you were not close at first, but you both had a similar experience, a similar difficulty in life, and now you have a bond together, this feeling. I've felt what you feel. I know where you are, and that is where we're going to find Jesus today. You see, Jesus has felt everything you and I will ever feel, from frustration to anger, to grief, to hardship. You see, we see in this text that Jesus is about to feel. He's feeling, he's knowing, he's becoming aware of betrayal. Jesus is betrayed by Judas. Now, Judas, we often think of Judas as just this bad guy of the Bible, and he was this bad guy of the Bible. He was this person who obviously went down the wrong path, who harbored greed in his heart, and eventually that greed led him to sell Jesus for money, for silver. But Judas wasn't just a bad guy of the Bible. Judas was a friend of Jesus. I think it's important to understand that. He was close to Jesus. He was around Jesus. He walked with Jesus. He did things that Jesus told him to do. He was even picked out of a crowd. Like, hey, Judas, I want you. He was picked out of that crowd by Jesus. You see, Judas wasn't just a distant relative that dropped in, discussed politics, didn't like the discussion, left after Christmas and went home. He wasn't just someone who came and infiltrated to destroy. Judas was a friend. Let me ask you this. Who handles your money, right? Like, who makes your budget? Who writes your checks? Who balances your checkbook? Who has access to your credit card or credit cards? likely it would be someone that you trust, right? You may say it could be your husband, but you're like, no, maybe not him. Could be your wife, maybe not her. But it's someone, whether it's an accountant or a secretary or a husband or a wife or a child, they are people that you trust. It's important to remember that Judas was this person for Jesus. That when they were feeding the poor, when they were buying the meal for the Passover they had just had, that Judas is the guy who opens the purse and says, okay, we got this much money, guys. This is what we have. This is what we can buy. This is what we can do. It's a person. Judas was a person that Jesus trusted. And Judas was trusted by Jesus, but Judas sold Jesus. Imagine the feeling of being betrayed by someone that you trust with your money. Some of you may have experienced that. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't experienced this kind of betrayal, but maybe you have. You were sold out. You were left high and dry. You had a family member who dumped you, a business partner who ditched you. But I want you to know this. This is important truth, something that we can find comfort in. That the God of the universe, in fleshly form, Jesus Christ, he came and he lived and he died, but he also felt the weight, the emotion of what you may be feeling in betrayal. Let's read on. Mark chapter 14, verse 27. So skip down to verse 27. And Jesus said to them, so they're leaving, eating together, and Jesus washing their feet, and Jesus has washed Judas himself's feet, and he's eaten with this dude who he knows is going to betray him. Pretty awesome character from Jesus in light of what he is feeling and he's aware of. Obviously, he's God. Verse 27. So they're leaving there, and Jesus said to them, the disciples, you will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter said to him, even though they all fall away, I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said, that's Peter, emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And look at this. This is something I haven't caught until I read this in detail and really studied it. And they all said the same. You see, Jesus knows what it is like, not just to be betrayed by someone he trusts, someone he loves. Jesus has felt what it's like to be let down or hurt by people he loves, invested in, gave to, served. You see, Jesus is moving past the betrayal of Judas, and he's acknowledging that his friends will abandon him, that he will be left alone to face the weight of the wrath of God on the cross. They all leave to save themselves. Now, when I read this, I'm going to be just a little bit vulnerable and honest with you, and this could get me in trouble at some time if it could come back to bite me. I'm just going to say that. But I'm a doer. I'm a person who likes to get things done. I like to be around people who get things done. I like to, even sometimes to a fault, like even if I just want to get it done, right? It doesn't matter if it's perfect, doesn't matter if it's right. I'm just a doer. I'm maybe what you would call a productionist instead of a perfectionist. And when I see what Peter says here, I just want to roll my eyes, right? I just want to cross my arms, sit back and go, oh, Peter, shut up, right? Keep your mouth shut. I hate big promises. I hate talk that doesn't deliver. I hate empty words. But you know what? The good news is Jesus is not like me, for those of you who like to talk a lot, right? He doesn't tell Peter, just as he didn't tell Judas, get out of here, I'm not washing your feet. Even though he feels this hurt, even though he feels this betrayal, even though he knows that Peter is ignorant in what he's saying, Jesus, in grace, and compassion, and patience, in the midst of his suffering, in the midst of the hurt that he's feeling, Jesus says, come on, guys. And he takes them with him. And he gives them opportunity. He gives them a chance. Like, even though I just told you you're going to deny me and every one of you are going to scatter, come on, big mouth Peter. Come on, you little band of weaklings. Come on, you go with me. Come with me to the garden. Jesus goes to the garden, right? So he leaves this dinner with his disciples, his last meal with them. He makes these promises of what he's going to do, that he's going to start this new kingdom, he's going to establish this new covenant with God, and that his blood is going to be the way and his life is going to be the way. And he washes the feet, and then we see Judas leave the party. The other 11 go with him, and they have this conversation. He feels their insecurity. He feels their need to talk when they shouldn't be talking, when they should be just with him and praying. He's carrying the weight of that all alone, I believe. And he goes out into the garden. You know, we should find great comfort in the truth that Jesus feels what you feel, what I feel. He's felt it. He knows it. He can empathize with us in whatever area we are. Maybe you have been let down by a family member. Maybe it wasn't total betrayal. Maybe, and let's just be real, maybe it was the general public buying up all of the baby wipes and toilet paper. You know, like that can bring about frustration. Maybe it was the general public refusing to quarantine. Maybe it was just that friend who forgot about you, who let you down. I want you to know the beauty of the gospel, the beauty of the incarnation of Jesus Christ coming and living and dying is that he's been there. He's felt it. Jesus knew grief. He knew hardship. He knew what it was to be let down, to be misunderstood, to be hated. And we should find great comfort in that truth. But though Jesus has felt everything you and I will ever feel, what we're about to see is that Jesus has felt things that you and I will never feel, or at least hopefully will never feel. Let's look at Mark 14:32 through 36. Jesus is in the garden. He tells these disciples who are big talkers, hey, stay here and pray. Let's just read it. And they went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, Daddy, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. And then he ends with, yet not what I will, but what you will. Now this is a scene that we've probably all seen. You know, we've probably all read, we've probably all heard before. You know, it's that scene how the Passion of Christ starts with Jesus in the garden. You see that creepy looking satanic snake-looking figure, and you see Jesus. Luke tells us that he's the physician, Luke, who wrote the gospel. Says, you know, we see him sweating blood in this moment. Some translations of that idea of my soul is very sorrowful, even to death, they say that Jesus is overcome with horror and dismay. That he's overcome with horror and anguish, overwhelmed, are some of the ways that that's translated. It's not just the regular old grief. Now, grief is a serious thing, and we're not making light of that, but we just need to understand that this is far deeper of what Jesus is experiencing, something that you and I hopefully will never experience. This is Jesus' greatest struggle. It wasn't being betrayed. It wasn't being denied by his friends or left hung out to dry by his friends or abandoned. You see, there's something deeper here. You know, this is one of the most unique passages in the Gospels. One of the most unique passages, I would say, in the whole Bible. One that maybe should make us a little insecure about Jesus and about him being God. And maybe if we really sat and thought that through and worked through that, we may come to that point. But when we read this, we should understand that it's different. You see, all the other stories in the Bible, all the other teaching, all the other experiences of Jesus, all the other miracles that he does are lessons, right? He heals a blind man, but that blind man is a lesson to the disciples about who God is, who they are, who Jesus is. When he teaches them, it's a teaching for the disciples. Say, this is who I am. That's what the Gospels are about. This is really God in the flesh, the Christ, the one to save us. But when we get to this point, this is all about Jesus. Like, it's not, there's no real lesson here other than this truth of what Jesus is struggling through. He's not teaching his disciples anything else. No, he's just allowing them to look in as friends to see him suffer. You see, Jesus' greatest struggle wasn't that he's being betrayed. It wasn't that he's even going to die. Jesus' greatest struggle in this moment is that he is going to experience the wrath of God. He's going to experience separation between he and God. That God is going to turn where for all eternity past, Jesus had been experiencing the goodness of God and perfect relationship, perfect dance and perfect time, total peace at all times. But in this moment, Jesus is saying yes to the truth that God is going to turn that good away, and there'll be nothing but the wrath and the righteousness and the justice of God falling on him. And it does have some to do with the cross, but it has more to do with the severed relationship between Jesus and God. You see, we see Jesus experience the full realm of human emotion, right? We see him angry. We see him throwing tables, right? That's pretty angry. You know, if you're throwing stuff, you're pretty angry. We see him frustrated. We see him frustrated with the disciples and their kind of ignorance about who he is and being misunderstood. We even see him grieving, right? We see him with John the Baptist, his best friend, his first cousin, kind of part of that Christmas story with him, who's the prophet to go before him. We see it. Excuse me. We see him with John the Baptist. When John the Baptist is killed, Jesus retreats, right? He goes up onto the mountainside to be away from everybody, just to grieve, to cry. We see him with Lazarus, the most famous, the shortest verse in the Bible, if you want to memorize one. Jesus wept when he walks into Lazarus' place. And we see Jesus, when he begins to raise Lazarus from the dead, kind of grunt and groan when he raises Lazarus from the dead. Jesus has experienced the full realm of human emotion. He had healed the blind. He had healed the invalid. He had given hearing to the deaf. He had even raised a man from the dead, and basically had done all that with no flinching. But here we see Jesus flinching. Why? Because he is going to choose to walk into the weight of hell, the wrath of God. Any person that says they want to go to hell or say, just send me to hell kind of ideas, they don't understand what hell is. They don't understand the weight and the depth and the length of it, but God does. Jesus did. And we see him shaken. We see him sorrowful to the core, where he just collapses on the ground in prayer. But yet, he chooses, out of love for God and love for you and me, in this moment, Jesus makes his decision. He chooses obedience. Jesus was obedient to go to the cross. He was obedient, not just, we refer to the cross, but not just to go to the cross, but to take the wrath of God, soaking up the wrath of God, the righteousness of God that would be poured out on those who were sinful, right? The sins of the world, taking all that on. Because Jesus was obedient, you and I can have peace in every struggle, in every situation. Why? Jesus' obedience brings us to a place where we can be at peace with God, where we can be made right with the one who controls it all, the one who is above it all, the one who is beyond it all. We can be at peace with the one who holds it all in his hands. You see, you can't be at peace in any circumstance and in any situation until you're at peace with God. I truly believe that. But when Jesus goes in obedience to that cross, he makes that way for you. He takes our punishment, and he makes that way for you and for me to be at peace with God. Do you need to be at peace with God today? Maybe you've tried church. Maybe you're doing church. Maybe you're sitting in the living room, and the wife and kids are watching it, and you're going, well, I better watch it with them. They're like, Dad, come on, there's no sports on, so why don't you come watch this with us? Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been doing church for your kids, but you're not at peace with God. You're an enemy of God. And that's harsh to say that, but it's true. I want you to know that you can be at peace today. It's very simple. All you do is give up on you. Give up on being all you're supposed to be. Give up on being in control of your life. We call it repentance. We call it turning from our way and turning to Jesus, believing He's the only one who can give us peace with God. He's the only one that can make our way to heaven. He's the only one that can give us life forever. It's that simple. Just giving up on me. That's a lot of where peace is lost in our life. Anxiety comes in. Fear rules. It's control, isn't it? Being in control. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm an adult, I'm a teenager. I'm supposed to have control over my life. The truth is, only God has total control. So, for those of you who are here today and you go, well, I'm at peace with God, right? Like, I'm a Christian, I tuned into this, I was looking forward to it, I'm here, I'm watching. I'm at peace with God, but I don't feel a lot of peace in this moment. I feel a lot of anxiousness. I want to show you something in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. It says this. Do not be anxious about anything. Okay, thank you. There's your lesson for the day. But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And look at verse 7. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Now, I feel pretty good about this. I feel like this is pretty clever. Don't be anxious. The teaching is don't be anxious, ask God. So just ask? Yes, just ask. Just asking with prayer, supplication means asking God to supply my needs, asking God to give to me. Don't be anxious, but ask God. You see, this is the journey to peace, right? This is how I get from the peace with God to the peace of God, is asking. That's what it says. You see, when we begin to do that, when we begin that process of laying down our need for control and that anxiousness that may be upon us all in this moment, whether it's from frustration to flat out fear, and just be overwhelmed with the situations, when we lay that down and say, God, will you fix it? God, will you make it right? We think that peace would come when everything is made right. That is kind of this idea of Jewish shalom, that everything is in balance, everything's made right. But the truth is this, that when we say, don't be anxious, but ask God, and we begin to ask God what the book of James teaches us, and what Jesus teaches us in Luke chapter 11, verse 13 and 14, and I've got that in the notes. You need to look at that one. It's really, really insightful, one that really changed the way prayer works for me. But when I ask of God, I don't always get what he wants to give, what I want. You know, he says, what father who, if her son asked him for an egg, would give him a scorpion? Right? Okay, yeah, good idea. Bad idea if you're a dad. But we see at the end in verse 11, Luke 11:14, and we see it here, that the reality of asking God for something is the surrender of me laying down control. And when I do that, I may not get the answer that I was asking for, but what I get is much better. I get God. I get God. The way Philippians 4:7 says is that when you ask, you may not get your answer, but you get the peace of God. And God is far better than anything you're asking for. God is far better than anything that you're worrying about. God is far better than money. We see that from Judas's life. God is far better than control. God is far better than anything you and I can grasp hold of or hold on to or reach out to in this world. He's far better. And what we genuinely need in the asking and the seeking is God himself. And the peace of God will guard your heart and your mind. Where does it begin for you? Does it begin in your heart, like just an emotional, that just kind of outburst comes, and you're frustrated, you're upset, you're aggravated, you're fearful? Does it start in your mind after thinking about it? What's the good news is no matter where it starts for you, if it's your heart or if it's your mind, when you and I are asking of God and we get God, what we get is peace that surpasses all understanding. Because of what Jesus has done, you and I can be at peace with God, and we can have the peace of God no matter what struggle we're facing. So as we end our time of teaching today, and I know you're probably in your living room, you're probably watching on a computer, maybe you got it on your big screen, with the sound bar rolling. I want to ask you a couple of questions or a few questions. And I want to ask you 2 questions, and then I want to give you some questions to talk about as a family. The first is this: are you at peace with God? If you're not at peace with God today, if that's been made very clear to you as you watch this today, you need to be at peace with God. And we want to help you. So what we ask is that you would just send us a private message right here on Facebook or wherever you are. Send us an email. Hey, I want to be at peace with God. I want to get right with Him. I want to give my life to Jesus. You can do that right there on your couch in the living room. We had people do that last week. Are we aware of people that did that last week? But we want to know, and we want to help you in that journey. The second thing is, if you're a believer, right? You're a Christian. You say, I'm already at peace with God. As a family, I want to give you 3 questions to talk about. You're going to probably finish this, eat lunch together. I know that's what we did last week at my house. You're going to be together. It's the benefits of the quarantine, I guess you would say. But 3 questions for you to talk about with your family. Or maybe if you're all alone, you're by yourself, write these down and journal these thoughts and turn them essentially into prayers. The first question is this: what am I anxious about? What am I anxious about? The second one, so discuss that as a family. 2, what do I need to thank God for? What do I need to just be reminded and remember and say out loud? God has given me. God has done good to me. God has given me what I needed. God has given me Himself. So, okay, what do I need to thank God for? And then thirdly, what do I need to ask God for? What do I need to ask God for? I want to encourage you with your families. I know parents, that first question is a doozy. Like you can be discreet with that. But I think there's value in sharing that with other people, right? Empathy, right? Of feeling what you're feeling with other people and being reminded of the goodness of God with other people. So let me encourage you to do those 3 questions as a family. As we close today, I just want to pray for you. So let's pray. Father, I thank you for your grace and your mercy in our lives. God, I thank you that, Jesus, you chose to be obedient so that we would never have to feel what it is to be separated from God. I thank you that your obedience brings us peace. Oh God, help us to walk and live in that peace. Laying down our anxieties, laying down our control, and trusting that, Jesus, you are better. Oh God, will you use us as instruments of peace in the world around us, whether we're working or we're at home with our kids, or we're unable to get out. God, be with us that we may be instruments of peace everywhere we are, most notably deep inside ourselves. In your holy name, God. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Leon Hicks, one of your elders, and I work very closely with the finance team. As we have experienced our second Sunday of remote worship, I want to speak to you briefly about our giving. Many of you are like me in that you like to make your offering in person, and you like to put it right in the plate as the plate gets passed by you on Sunday morning during the worship service. When we're not able to meet, it's hard for us to remain in our comfort zone. The expenses related to the ministry of Connect Church go on whether we meet or not, however. Staff salaries, mortgage payments, rent, all need to be paid. So it's important that even when we're not meeting, we give in order to meet those expenses. So I'd like to encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and to continue giving in a way that may be different than what you're used to. First, the most secure and efficient way is to make an offering by going to our website at www.goconnectchurch.org. Click on the Give link and follow the instructions. Alternatively, there will be a giving link at the end of this message, and there will be a giving link at the end of the sermon notes in the Bible app. Finally, if you just aren't comfortable with electronic giving, please call me or text me at 256-298-4010 or call the church office, and we'll make arrangements to have someone meet you and accept your offering in person. One last thought. Some of our partners at Connect Church have been economically affected by the social distancing and the business closings that have occurred. Some have been laid off, others have had their hours reduced. So besides making an extra effort to get your offering to the church, I want to also encourage those of you with the means to be on the lookout for friends and neighbors who might suddenly be needful. Be the hands and feet of Jesus by helping your neighbors meet those needs. Thanks for listening, thanks for giving, and thanks for being one of God's faithful. May God bless you all.